The spring selling season kicks off as the political fight over the Reserve Bank escalates. New recommendations to make it easier for part-time workers, and the revolution happening in the world of bananas. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Monday, the 9th of September, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and welcome back, Sean Aylmer.
Hello, Michael. Great to be back in the studio.
I'm glad you had a nice little break sunning yourself. You are looking particularly tanned.
Which for me is saying something. Very fair-skinned.
And it shall fade by Wednesday. Now, the main story this morning, Sean, great to have you back. The spring selling season kicked off over the weekend with more than 2,000 homes going under the hammer and the preliminary clearance rate picking up to nearly 72%.
It's make or break time for many homeowners and real estate agents, and this spring selling season is being watched very closely to see if some Australians really will need to sell their homes, as Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock put it last week. So far, so good. Very early, obviously. 2,065 homes went to auction, of which 932 were in Melbourne, where the preliminary clearance rate came in at 71.1%. Sydney hosted 774 auctions. According to CoreLogic, its clearance rate was 73.2%. Looking at some of the smaller capitals, Adelaide came in at 80%, Brisbane 62.1%, Canberra 65.5%. The overall clearance rate is above the 10-year average. So the market is still okay, particularly in the smaller cities. They're probably not booming. Of course, last week, Michelle Bullock warned that some Australians will have to sell their homes to cope with higher inflation and interest rates, and businesses might have to restructure their operations and lay off staff to survive, which was pretty controversial, particularly given 3 or 4 years ago, the Reserve Bank said there wouldn't be any rate hikes for a couple of years.
Yeah, indeed. Now, the Reserve Bank has become something of a political football in recent weeks, and that focus is going to intensify in coming weeks as more homes do go up for sale. Now, a couple of former federal treasurers have weighed into the debate.
Oh, it's a story that keeps giving, Michael. Would you agree?
Oh, it absolutely is. Every day there has been something new on this because there are so many political angles, economic angles. It's just got everything.
Sure does. Yesterday, Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, said government spending is a key reason there hasn't been a recession. He was defending criticism of government spending. He said the opposition wants the economy to go into recession for political purposes. That came after former Labor Treasurer Wayne Swan accused the Reserve Bank of punching itself in the face and putting economic dogma over rational economic decision-making. That triggered a response from former Coalition Treasurer Peter Costello, who dared the Albanese government to change the Reserve Bank's inflation target, otherwise stop sniping. Dr. Chalmers yesterday ruled out changes to the inflation target, saying he absolutely endorsed it, while also talking up the Reserve Bank's dual mandate of targeting full employment. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg syndrome here. The government spending has kept the economy out of recession. I think we'd all agree on that. It's also pushed up inflation. At the centre of it all is the Reserve Bank. Yesterday, Dr. Chalmers said he and Governor Michelle Bullock were aligned in their fight against inflation. Not so sure about that one, Michael.
Where does this end up, Sean? Because the Reserve Bank is supposed to be kind of completely apolitical, isn't it? And it's not a good look, is it, for it to be kind of caught up in a political storm?
Yeah, I mean, it's a political storm, not a Reserve Bank storm. So Michelle Bullock has been very frank. She's very, she speaks her mind, Michelle Bullock, and always has done for many, many years. And she just said it as she saw it. Now, it was Jim Chalmers who had to go a week ago and Wayne Swan had to go. Peter Costello, who actually established the Charter of Independence for the Reserve Bank, he didn't really have a go at the Reserve Bank. He just said, he made it political by saying, well, if you don't like the 2 to 3% target band, change it. We'll get the Reserve Bank to change it, and then off we go. I don't think the bank itself has done much, but it's just because we have growth slowdown that we've seen. We still have inflation too high. We have the spring selling season kicking off. All this is going on at a time when interest rates are relatively high compared to the last 15 years or so, not relatively high compared to the last 40 years. You put all that into it and an election at some point before May next year, you just get the Reserve Bank becoming a punching bag.
It was kind of inevitable, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's fair to say that.
Now, local markets. How did things finish up on Friday?
Well, a rally in bank stocks helped the ASX close higher on Friday, up nearly 0.5% to just over 8,000 points. All big four banks were up around 1.5%, dragging on the benchmark with the mining stocks, with iron ore futures heading back towards $90 a tonne. BHP closed down more than 1% on Friday. Futures trading suggests the local market is set to open much lower after a bad weekend on Wall Street. For all of last week, basically the financials and property stocks kept things going okay, while the energy stocks lost a lot of ground last week.
Now, thanks to Blue Chip Communication, the experts helping financial services companies market, communicate and grow. Visit bluechipcommunication.com.au. You mentioned Wall Street there, Sean. What did happen?
It really was a bit of a wipeout week last week, particularly with those magnificent 7 tech stocks not looking so magnificent. Over the weekend, Tesla dropped 8%. Nvidia and Alphabet fell more than 4%. Amazon and Meta were both off more than 3%. Now, part of the reason for the tech-specific pessimism over the weekend, at least, reflected disappointing sales outlook for Broadcom, one of the big tech companies in the US. The S&P 500 had its biggest weekly drop last week since March 2023, down 4.2%. The tech-heavy NASDAQ, it registered its biggest weekly drop since January 2022. That was almost 6%. The selling wave gained momentum after August jobs data out on Friday night US time was slightly weaker than expected, and after 2 Federal Reserve officials separately said the time had arrived for rate cuts, renewing concerns that the Fed has kept rates too high for too long. Away from Wall Street, Brent crude's trading around $71 a barrel, continuing its slide to its lowest point since the end of December. Fears about waning demand from the Chinese and US manufacturing sectors pretty much overshadowing OPEC Plus's postponement of plans to increase production. That's why we're seeing pressure on prices. A lot of peas and all that, Michael. I'm just going to move on.
It really was, wasn't there? Like, we're really testing you on your first day back here.
Picked a pick of pickles. Yep. Gold's trading just under $2,500 an ounce. It's been around that sort of record high level for about a month now. And the Aussie dollar's buying just under 67 US cents.
Now, Sean, you mentioned quite a bit about Wall Street there, and you mentioned NVIDIA as well. Immediately after the show, we have an interview coming up with Josh Gilbert from eToro, and he takes a fairly close look, actually, at Wall Street and some of the winners and losers from earnings season, and then a really in-depth look at what happened with NVIDIA last week, because, of course, that was the biggest ever one-day drop in market value, $279 billion in a single session. It was really quite extraordinary. So he talks all about what that means, what the outlook is, in his opinion, for NVIDIA, but then also we crammed a lot into one interview. He then brings it back home and looks at some of the local companies in the AI space as well, and potentially some ideas for investors there. So a great one for an overview of Wall Street, an overview of earnings, an overview of AI, and then also some stuff for investors. It's really got everything, Sean.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing it. Well, that NVIDIA drop is amazing. I mean, it's worth 2.5 trillion US now, which is obviously a huge amount, but that's not that far off a trillion less than Apple. Apple's at 3.4 trillion. NVIDIA is 2.5. Not that long ago, NVIDIA was the biggest company on Wall Street. So it's quite amazing.
It's a big move in not a big period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a technical way of describing it.
Goodness me. Oh, Sean, really, I'm busting out my finest for you today. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Australia has one of the highest shares of part-time employment across OECD countries, but the share of women engaging in shorter working hours has been falling for 10 years, and particularly since the pandemic.
That's right. Around 30% of women and men choose part-time work, but they face a part-time promotion cliff, with promotion rates half the level of their full-time counterparts. It just looks like if you work part-time, you are going to be biased against when it comes to that promotion. That's according to a Workplace Gender Equality Agency report undertaken by the Bank West Curtin Economic Centre. Part-time employment is higher in female-dominated sectors and in larger organisations. The part-time total remuneration gender gap sits at 2.7% in favour of women. This compares to a total remuneration gender pay gap for full-time workers that has declined from 24.8% to 18.3% over the past decade. That, of course, is in favour of men. The most rapid increases in full-time work over the past 3 years have taken place among women aged between 35 and 55. The report recommends that part-time work and other flexible work arrangements be normalised and work practices be redesigned to allow a broader range of work options. I'm sure we will get a response from the government on this one some point this week, because it is a very, very big issue for many people in the workforce.
Yeah, indeed. Now, speaking of the government, Labor has confirmed Multiple questions will be included on sexual orientation and gender in the 2026 census.
Treasurer Jim Chalmers said the census will include a new section on sexual orientation and gender, although the questions would be determined by the Australian Bureau of Statistics at a later date. It's part of the government's efforts to quell the LGBTQ community's anger over its original exclusion from the count. Dr. Chalmers said the government had changed its mind after listening to the community. Only people aged 16 years and over will be asked sexual orientation and gender questions, and the new topic will also exclude questions about variations in people's sex characteristics.
The tech industry has given the thumbs up to the development of guardrails for the safe and responsible development of artificial intelligence in Australia.
The Tech Council of Australia was a typical response from the industry. It said the guidelines were a crucial step in building an appropriately balanced regulatory strategy for AI governance to support confidence and responsible adoption in the new technology, according to Smart Company. Late last week, Science and Industry Minister Ed Husic released voluntary AI safety standards that include measures such as labelling and watermarking AI-generated content. It's in response to concerns about the misuse of biometric data, social scoring, and criminal exploitation of AI. Minister Husic emphasised that while these are voluntary now, the government is exploring legislation to mandate these safeguards in high-risk areas like healthcare, law enforcement and recruitment.
Sean, I don't know what to make of this next story. Mentioned at the top of the show, this one got a mention, but the Cavendish banana may never be the same, with the first genetically modified fruit grown in Australia officially ripe for picking.
Over the weekend, two very brave biotechnologists were due to fly to Darwin, drive the Kakadu Road to Humpty Doo, and taste the first genetically modified banana grown in Australia.
It sounds like the origin story for a superhero, doesn't it?
Yeah, it could be. It could be.
Yeah, well, actually, do you remember the TV show Banana Man? Oh, you probably don't.
No.
But it is very similar. And every time he ate a banana, he turned into kind of this hulking kind of character. Anyway.
Very much like me.
We could actually be seeing it happen in real life right now.
We could. So do you know how many bananas are eaten in Australia every day?
Oh, hundreds of thousands would be my guess.
5 million.
You're kidding.
No.
That's a whole bunch.
That's a whole bunch, according to Nutrition Australia. 5 million every day. Now, the genetically modified banana, dubbed QCAV4, was granted final approval for human consumption in April, but only now have any of the trees actually bore fruit, according to a report in The Guardian. One of the biotechs that took that road to Humpty Doo said the bananas look the same, feel the same, peel the same, smell the same, and he's 99.99% sure they're going to taste exactly the same. But until he got regulatory approval and they grew some, he couldn't eat any of them. So he can't be 100% sure. He's just 99.99% sure. Now, Cavendish bananas account for about 97% of all sales of bananas in Australia. Commercial bananas are sterile, meaning that they're propagated by cutting stems from a parent plant. So that means, Michael, if you follow that logic, every single Cavendish banana ever grown is a clone of a single seed produced as a naturally occurring hybrid, probably more than 1,000 years ago, scientists reckon. Incredible story, but the lack of genetic diversity makes the Cavendish bananas vulnerable to bacterial disease, hence the need for a slight genetic modification.
Does it surprise you at all, Sean, that we have so many varieties of apples? For instance, you got like your Granny Smith and your Red Delicious, your Golden Delicious, your Fuji, your Pink Ladies, your
Jazz.
Yeah, exactly. And we only have, really, you've only got your Cavendish or your Ladyfingers.
Very good point.
Yeah.
What amazes me is that 97% are Cavendish, and so presumably the bulk of the other 3% are Ladyfingers. But you are right, I have never thought of that.
Yeah.
Well, no, do you know what it is? No, because they're sterile. So I'm absolutely talking out the proverbial at the moment because I don't know. I'm making it up, but I'm presuming apples are not sterile, therefore you can create new varieties. But when you have a sterile plant like a banana, you can't. Making it up? Yes.
It sounded so good, though.
It did.
I genuinely believed everything you just said. You have got so much credibility that even when you're making up stuff about bananas, I still believe you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was halfway through and I just thought, actually, someone who knows what they're talking about is going to write in and say, no, you idiot, that's not how it works. However, until that happens, that is the story.
We are sticking with this. This is the
Good.
official fear and greed line. I like it. We better get on to international news. Apple's iPhone 16 will launch tonight. I'm very excited about this, with a next generation chip promising to bring more generative artificial intelligence features to its smartphones.
Apple will use SoftBank-owned ARM's, that's ARM, ARM's newest V9 chip design in its smartphones, according to the Financial Times. Apple's adoption of V9 for the iPhone, which is about half of Apple's total revenues, represents a massive boost for ARM, obviously. It has entered into a multi-year licensing agreement with Apple. The V9 chip is considered among the most advanced available. Apple's already using it, or at least the V9 architecture, for its newest line of M4 MacBook products. It announced that back in May. It said the M4 brought a giant leap in performance for the next generation of its PCs. Now it's looking at putting it into its phones. We'll find out tonight. Apple's in the process of recasting itself as an AI-focused company, announcing a number of features in June that it collectively calls Apple Intelligence. Things like a smarter Siri, custom emoji generation, and photo editing capabilities using its own in-house AI models. It's also in partnership with OpenAI's ChatGPT. The increased computer demands that come from running AI models on a mobile device basically means you need the latest chip technology, and that's where the V9 comes in.
Elon Musk's America PAC is firing up its digital ad campaign in support of Donald Trump's presidential bid. The messages so far, Sean, have been targeted at swing state voters. You've got to say, they've been very blunt.
Yes, Musk promised to spend tens of millions of dollars campaigning for the Republicans, or more specifically for Donald Trump. That started an ad on Google's YouTube, shown more than 3 million times, says, if you sit this election out, Kamala and the crazies will win. You'll be stuck with higher costs and more illegals invading our country. End quote. That's according to the Financial Times. It paints Trump, by contrast, as an, and I quote, American badass. B-A-D-A-L-S, American badass. With a video of the former president after the July assassination attempt. An ad on Facebook says, and I quote, we must stop, that's S-T-O-P in capitals, very Donald Trump, isn't it? We must stop Kamala while we can. Another uses a Russian accent and says, meet Comrade Kamala, ready to bring Soviet Union to Michigan. There's no sort of truth in advertising around this, is there?
There's not of any civility. Like this. No. I love the Kamala and the crazies will win. Like, oh, okay, all right. We're just name calling here, aren't we?
Oh my God, it's pretty outrageous.
Now, Sean, this one to finish up on.
Yes.
UK streaming platform. I didn't realise it was actually UK based, but the streaming platform OnlyFans. To be fair, I don't know a lot about it, which feels like I'm protesting too much
already.
Here.
Yeah,
I'm protesting too much, but I genuinely don't. It's primarily used by sex workers, by sports stars, by celebrities. Paid $6.6 billion to content creators last year, and more than $630 million to its owner, Ukrainian-American entrepreneur Leonard Radvinsky.
So OnlyFans is a really interesting model. Just put aside whether you appreciate the content or not. What it does do is pay the content creators direct, as opposed to having a middle person or a studio that takes a big chunk of it. OnlyFans takes about a fifth of the payment made on its platform. So the other 80% basically goes to the stars of the show. It's become an increasingly popular way for online creators to offer video content directly to consumers. Obviously, the sex industry is very heavily involved in that one. The number of creator accounts grew to 4.1 million. Creator accounts, 4.1 million, while the total number of fan accounts is now more than 300 million.
Oh.
That's at the end of last year, both an increase of almost a third on the previous year. Many of those who use the platform are sex workers, although the company says there's a wide range of content and offer, from sports and music to yoga and wellness, aimed directly at individual fans. These fans can pay additional tips or extra for on-demand paid content and private messaging, in addition to the subscription fees. Whatever you think about the morality of it, and let's just park that, whether you like or dislike or whatever, it has been an incredibly successful platform, particularly to get money into the hands of the content providers.
So the sport and music and yoga and wellness and everything, are you seeing an opportunity here for business news as well? And instead of fear and greed business news, fear and greed business nudes.
I actually reckon the name Fear and Greed would do pretty well on
I reckon it probably
OnlyFans.
would. Anyway, we will investigate this. We'll put this to Adam Lang, our business partner.
He will blush.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I look forward to our operations meeting when we will discuss this in detail. Up next is the Fear and Greed daily interview with Josh Gilbert today from eToro.
All about NVIDIA and what's going on with those tech stocks over there in the US. Also, what it means for the local tech stocks.
Yeah, indeed. It is a great chat, particularly for investors. It is up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. And of course, Sean, before that, we have Fear and Greed the week ahead with Sherelle Murphy from EY.
Yeah, not exactly a prime week. We have the consumer sentiment figures from Westpac Melbourne Institute. We have the National Australia Bank business conditions and sentiment. We also have a few second-tier ABS stuff. I think the chief economist of the Reserve Bank, she's talking as well. So bits and pieces this week.
Yeah, still worth a listen. It is up next. And then after that, Josh Gilbert. So plenty of good listening for your Monday. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Monday, the 9th of September, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.